some of the altcoins behind me are literally eating your profits alive, and I really wanted to make this video because a lot of people do not understand exactly why. They're some of the most promising, influential, and hyped up projects in the entire crypto space, but people just seem to think that they're good and forget one very critical, important, I guess, error or factor. And today I'm going to talk about that, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about one of these projects behind me at the very end of today's video and why it is eating your profits alive, okay? But before we do, I want to actually quiz you guys very briefly. Now, on this sheet right here is how you're losing money. Now, I'm not talking about quant specifically, right? It does happen a lot. And again, the answer is somewhere on this page. I'm going to give you 1 second to think about where it could possibly be. Well, for those of you that guessed the token vesting, you were 100% correct. Now, I want to just say, before any of you guys hear what I just said and go, boring, and click off the video, I got some news for you because you are the exact person that needs to listen to this. This 10, 15 minute video, whatever it turns out to be, might be the best 10, 15 minutes you've spent in the last week looking at crypto, because I guess you're someone who probably just likes to listen to people that tell you you're doing the right thing. So allow me to challenge your thoughts and open your mind up to some different ways of approaching investments, okay? So this is a very important topic to understand, as it will maximize your profits and potentially save you from a bad investment. Now, what am I talking about here? I'm specifically, and I want to reiterate this, specifically talking about profits. The project might be good, and the ones that I've actually listed today, and some of the ones I've listed today, are good projects that I have invested in, but they are eating your profits alive if you're not exposing yourself correctly, okay? So let's begin to talk a little bit about token vesting or token emissions, right? There's two different types. You need to differentiate, okay? There's emissions, aka block rewards, which are released by the protocol for rewards, block rewards slowly, okay? So these are, the block is mined, for example, and there's the reward that's in the block to incentivize the miners or validators to create it, is then distributed. Those tokens have to come from somewhere. So they come from the protocol through inflation, right? And this is typically steady, as you can see by the dotted line here. Most projects will have this as a dotted line on their vesting. On the other side of the things, we have the vesting, aka the locked tokens. This is a predetermined sharp, but they're not always sharp, unlocks to various entities from the initial distribution or token generation event. So when they first launch, typically the first block, called the Genesis block, has a whole heap of information inside of it, and typically they've pre-mined a whole heap of tokens to give out to investors and different people that are locked up for periods of time. And that's typically represented by this. And as you can see, typically, normally at least, it's very sharp, which is where you have to be very careful, and then it trails off. So you do have to know the difference, because this will come in handy when you might want to hold off buying and maybe buy here, especially if it aligns with the bear bull market cycle, okay? Now, a project can actually have both of these, just one of these, or none of these, okay? And it does make a difference. So let's have a look at that first chart. This is Mina Protocol, one of my all-time favorite projects. But now, again, we're maximizing profits here, maximizing. So we're going to talk about why Mina obviously hasn't done the best job, okay? So most entities have their tokens by month 48, as we can see over here, other than the community rounds. Now, we're getting quite specific. The community rounds here obviously have theirs trailing off until everyone has their tokens permanently right over here on month 96, right? Now, emissions are infinite, and they do trail off to a steady 7% year on year. So they actually have a mechanism where the inflation is quite sharp, and it kind of matches the unlock here, but then it gets to a point where it goes to 7% year on year, forever. Now, 7% isn't that bad, and people are scared with this factor. And a good thing to know is, obviously, with a chart like this, you know when these people, what I call third parties, investors, team, advisors, get their tokens, they might want to sell them, especially if this period, month 24, happens to be the top of a bull market. So we can kind of expect a possible sell-off, and, well, there's not many more unlocks after that, so that might be a good time to buy. This is very simple stuff, but of course, this is what I call both, right? You have both vesting tokens and also emissions, so it's kind of the worst of both worlds, because even if you do obviously stake your tokens to beat the inflation, well, chances are you might get dumped on still. So let's look at the two other one options. So one side of it, we could just look at the emissions, right? Polkadot's a great example, right? All the tokens are, from the distribution are already out there. It's 100% out there. So all we're looking at right now is, well, the inflation, okay? So this shows a steady 10% year-on-year inflation rate for Polkadot. This line right here, you can see it slowly going up. Now, I couldn't really find any information on Polkadot's vesting schedule out there, so this is the best we have to do, but it suffices, so you can just ignore this bottom part. This is like their bonding and staking colors. So we're only looking at this right here, right? So as you can see, it's a lot steadier, and ultimately this is, in my opinion, better than focusing on just vesting. We'll look at an example in a second, because we can offset this with of course staking your tokens on the protocol itself. Not through third-party websites, guys, on the protocol itself is very important, right? And I have my reasons for that. I'm not going to touch on it in this video. But essentially, we're not fighting off the potential for unlocks. We're only fighting against inflation, which again is healthy for a network. It's not bad, and staking is a great way to fight that, okay? Now, on the other side of it, the one side for the vesting, okay, so this is Hedera. Now, Hedera doesn't have an inflation rate. No inflation, but right now the tokens are still unlocking per their distribution. Now this is their distribution chart. They don't really forecast it very well, so there's reasons for that. But again, this can look very intimidating to someone who doesn't know much about crypto, business structures, anything like that. This is very businessy, okay? So how can you quickly tell if it's just the vesting? Well, you come over here. This is a very, very quick tell. You go on CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko, and essentially you can know there's no inflation because the max supply and total supply are the exact same. They're fixed, right? Now, this might not always be the case, but typically you'll see the total supply begin to tick over even in the max supply. Okay, the max supply is how many tokens there will ever be in the distribution, right, at the beginning of the network. And the total supply will go up or go down if there's an inflation rate or burn mechanism, irrespective of the max supply. So again, this is actually a quick tell to see if there is a burn mechanism as well. But it's nice to see it's just flat 50-50, which means there's no inflation and no burn rate. So that obviously tells us, hey, there's going to be a supply shock some point in time. But on the contrary, until all those tokens are in circulation, there's going to be some unlocks. And a lot of you guys in the HBAR community know that there was recently a pretty big unlock. Okay, so I don't like to take CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko's word for it because they're wrong a lot of the time, and a lot of people get their stuff confused because all they look at is this for their DYOR. So you want to look a little bit deeper. And where I found the vesting schedule, I also found this, right? This was from the horse's mouth. And again, you should always confirm it from the horse's mouth, aka from the personal protocol themselves. The Hedera network was launched with a total supply of 50 billion tokens. Now, the jargon here can be mixed up, and some of you might think total supply, okay, well, that's not max supply. The jargon is different on different networks. You got to kind of summarize this yourself, unfortunately, right? It's part of being a human, okay? So that's actually the other side of it, and I've talked about this in the past and how good this possibly is for a supply shock. But in saying that, until that point fully comes, until all the tokens are in circulation, well, I actually prefer inflation because you can at least offset that and there's no scary unlock, albeit as long as the tokens are, of course, have been sold and evenly distributed. Now, the last one is none. And this is where projects like Hedera are actually going to. We see Bitcoin, Chainlink, and of course, Coin Network over here. And that is they don't have any inflation and all the tokens are in circulation. Are there any projects currently in this? No. NA, at least from what I can find. So they are all heading this direction, but of course they have very long unlock periods, at least until like 2029 plus. So we have to just wait for this to happen. But ideally, this is the best situation for us. And again, it's the best for your profits and rewards because ultimately you got no worries. Really, the price is just going to keep going up from there. Of course, as long as demand follows. So we'll talk about how, some of these projects in a second can be detrimental because as you can imagine, if they're both, well, again, if you're someone who's investing, let's just say in Mina Protocol's case, right at the very, very start, you are going to be heavily diluted from the unlocks and the inflation rate. So you might, I've seen in the past, I think it was Casper Network, like they 3, 4, 5x their circulating supply in like a few years. So you've got to understand your tokens then 4, 5, whatever it is, multiples less valuable. Okay, it's very important to understand. And people just disregard this because they don't understand how important it really is. Quite obviously, right? Now the best situation for profits, okay? So number one, now again, this is the best. All the tokens are in circulation with zero dilution, great for a supply shock when demand catches up. This is a great thing because eventually there's no more tokens, emitting in circulation. So what happens is when demand continues to rise, there will be a point where no more are being created by the protocol, no more are being released in the vesting schedule, and instead of the price gradually going up, it'll have a massive what's called supply shock, where it just multiples get more and more expensive because there's finite resources. It's simple as that, right? Now, again, this is my second best, is just the emissions, okay? All initial distribution is in circulation, slow release only inflation, so then you can offset the inflation rate with the staking rewards. There are obviously risks involved with staking and bonding, but alas, that is for a different video. Number 3, we have the vesting, of course. No inflation, but the initial distribution is unlocking. Of course, this is great for an eventual supply shock, but of course, you probably find it'll be up here in that case. Bad for the project's longevity. It is actually bad for the project's longevity unless it is highly denominal. Just like we have $100 can be broken up into 50s, 20s, 10s, 5s, 1s, 2s, 50s, all the cent coins from there. That's denominal. Okay, so if you have a coin, token, for example, that can be divided up into like Quant, for example, or Chainlink into 16 places, which is a lot more than our current physical fiat system. But what does that allow? Well, you can break up one quant token into 16 different parts. So it is actually, you're pretty much multiplying the supply by 16 times. And the same with other networks out there as well. But there will eventually become a time where you will have to create more tokens. In the back end, through governance proposals, there is ways that there can be a way to increase this supply, because a lot of these projects, and I'm talking probably 20, 30 years from now, maybe even more, will have no more tokens to give out, so therefore the protocol can't function. Everyone's holding them, everyone's using them for different reasons other than the intended purpose, and therefore obviously the network will stall. No one's going to use the network, so they have to obviously create more tokens, and there's always a back-end process typically for this, which is why I don't actually like it for the longevity of the project, and why I respect Charles Hoskinson for pointing this out many, many times with Cardano. Number 4 is both. So tokens are still vesting, and there is an inflation rate, as we saw currently with Mina Protocol. Most projects start here, which is actually healthy, but can diminish your profits. So this is where we're focusing our attention today, okay? Again, the projects I'm going to list aren't bad projects. They're just in this both phase where ultimately they're vesting a lot of tokens rapidly and they have an emissions. Okay, so again, for the newbie investor or armchair investor, someone who just invests and sit back, you'll come back eventually to your tokens and be like, well, that didn't go how I expected, even if demand picks up. So it's one thing to consider. Okay, next, there is one slight alternative, so we're going to ignore the top two. It only applies to these two. Now, it only applies when a project retains a large amount of the unreleased tokens, so either locked or unlocked, that aren't classified as circulating and can use those whenever they like. Some have unlock and public courtesy parameters, others don't. Well, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about Stellar, XLM, reserve rights, where you have these tokens that actually aren't locked up per se, or they might be locked up, but there's parameters, either be ethical parameters or physical smart contract parameters, that they can't use those tokens until a certain period of time, but they aren't actually locked up per se. Okay, so, or they're in the hands of the team, essentially, okay? So this is a whole new sort of factor and potential danger into this one, which is why I prefer this. Not all protocols have this, I'll admit, but you got to remember this is the case with some of the more well-known projects. Now, I'm not saying that it's ever going to be an actual issue, but just food for thought, of course, right? Now, there is one exception to this whole entire thing, and that's a burn mechanism I've spoken to you about earlier. Now, there is never a one-size-fits-all. You must always dig deeper, but checking CoinMarketCap for a difference in total supply is also a quick tell, as I explained to you moments ago. But as I say down here, burn mechanisms can also be very bad, just like how I explained having a finite supply of tokens forever is a very dangerous thing. You can just imagine that on steroids if you're burning them as well. So there's two sides of this coin, okay? And be very careful. The degens are going to attack me if I keep saying too much, okay? So which project should you be careful of? Now, before I tell you, I want to say, guys, NordVPN have helped me. They are sponsoring me, at least for the next month. And ideally, I'd like you guys, if you do enjoy my content, to really support me by, if you do decide to use NordVPN, to go down below into the pinned comment and use my link to sign up. I'd really appreciate that. Ultimately, it allows me to keep making content for you guys, which is my hopefully has given you guys a lot of knowledge over the time. All right, What are the projects? Well, again, it shouldn't really be a very disgusting, horrible, don't look at these projects thing, because again, I've invested in them, okay? But in saying that, you do have to be careful for your armchair and newbie investors. Things like 𝗡cie, Optimism, Gala, and I've thrown in a meme coin. This is the first time I've spoken about a meme coin on my channel. Dogelon Mars. I didn't even look into this project. I just threw it up there because I expect it to be that case. And I want to say that for the record, okay? Now, again, these projects, I've invested in them, okay? So I want to say this for the record. It's okay to look at them. You just have to be aware if there is any sharp vesting schedules or lots of tokens to be unlocked, especially paired with an inflation rate, you may be diluting if the demand from the users, the network, and speculation doesn't beat that, okay? Very careful, guys. And again, take this information with what you will, all right? The main thing for this video was to grab your attention and shake you and say, you need to be very careful. Now, there are actual projects out there that I would tell you to be very careful of, and that might be a whole different video. Now, of course, token distribution in part ways with the vesting schedule is just as important, because ultimately this is going to give us an idea, as I said earlier, into third parties, the investors, the team and the advisors, and ultimately large community rounds where individual community members can have lots of tokens for dirt cheap prices. In that case, just like venture capitalists or team or advisors, they will be incentivized to want to sell their tokens at the drop of a hat if some bad news comes out, whatever it might be. So what does that tell us? Well, ultimately, we can, buy more tokens or try to beat that, which is pretty impossible nowadays, and sell our tokens first, okay? This does not mean these are bad projects. It's just that we obviously need to be mindful that we might not get as much profits as advertised by YouTubers. We need to dig deeper, and I'm here for you. If you need my help, let me know. Send me a DM on Twitter. I'll respond to you. I'll get back to you, and you can get a one-on-one call with me, and I'll help you through this. If not, it's simple, right? You just go down below, and most of the community is very, very helpful, okay? Ultimately, guys, you need to be aware of the vesting schedule. If you're not already, it will make a big difference in your profits. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. I have been slightly sick lately, so I apologize if things were a bit skippy at some parts. Okay, take care.